The Montana Supreme Court is locked in a power struggle with the Montana legislature. Against this backdrop, two candidates are vying for the top job on the High Court, the Chief Justice seat. Montana PBS's Sam Wilson reports.
On a sunny weekday in August, the two candidates for Chief Justice of the Montana Supreme Court have brought their campaigns to very different corners of the state. Also different are the pictures they paint of the court for voters.
Your judiciary, our judiciary, is under an unprecedented assault. It's a national playbook. It's a grab for power. And I will promise you this, that as your Chief Justice, I will maintain the independence of the judiciary, the integrity of the judiciary, and the ethics of the judiciary.
The trend that I don't like in the Supreme Court is a court that is not as restrained and unbiased and fair and impartial as I'd like it to be.
Corey Swanson is serving his third term as the elected Broadwater County Attorney and had worked as a deputy for 2 years under former Republican Attorney General Tim Fox. He says the structure of the court system in Montana gives the Supreme Court particular influence.
So in Montana, we don't have an intermediate appellate court. Like our cases start in the district court, and then if the losing side wants to appeal, they can appeal to an appellate court. In a lot of other states, there's an intermediate appellate court. In the federal world, there's an intermediate appellate court. And in Montana, there isn't. It's all appeals go straight to the Montana Supreme Court. So the Montana Supreme Court really has that function of being the first appellate court, but the final appellate court as well.
Jeremiah Lynch served as a federal magistrate judge in Montana for 13 years before retiring from the bench in 2019. Before that, he worked as a private practice attorney in Great Falls.
We are a constitutional democracy designed by the people of Montana in 1972 with the most marvelous constitution in the United States. That constitution ensured that the judiciary would be an independent and I emphasize, co-equal branch of government. The judiciary is the mortar of our constitutional democracy. In other words, it holds it together via the rule of law.
The current balance of powers was struck during the 1972 Constitutional Convention. May Nan Ellingson was the youngest delegate at the convention, and she argued for giving citizens more power through the legislature.
I'm a big believer in legislative power because I was on the legislative committee, and my big goal and our whole committee's goal was to raise the stature of the legislature, because prior to 1972, it was the weak link.
Steve Fitzpatrick is the Montana Senate Majority Leader and says the balance of power has indeed shifted.
I think when you look at it from a system of government point of view, the judicial branch obviously exercises a check both on the executive branch and the legislative branch, and vice versa. We also serve as a check on the judicial branch. The legislative branch has the ability to rewrite law in response to decisions, and we do it quite frequently. I carry a bill, I think, almost every session, which is intended to modify or, in our view, correct judicial decisions. So I think in the grand scheme of things, they are the smallest branch, and their power is not really what the other two branches have.
So again, this is the Senate Select Committee on Judicial Oversight and Reform. Would like to go into some kind of ground rules of what we're doing here and how we're going to...
The Senate Select Committee on Judicial Oversight and Reform was created in April 2024 to corral what Republican legislators describe as an out-of-control court system. The proceedings have put a fine point on the partisan tensions surrounding the judiciary.
I can say, and I will say this publicly, that I'm highly disappointed in the Democrats for not showing up to this meeting. This is an important meeting. We have a responsibility to the citizens of Montana, and this is not about party politics at all in any way, shape.
We hear about this leftist extremist court. No way. This is the most moderate court we've had in the 40 years of my practice. When you see these attacks on the court, you see it every day in the paper. The Senate Select Committee is going to investigate the court. About what? Because they did their job?
There is a certain level of hostility right now between the courts and the legislature. certainly between the Supreme Court and the legislature. There's a lot of suspicion. We need to get the air out of that balloon. That's what I think that the Chief Justice needs to be able to do. Well, because today we have a Montana with a lot of conservative elected officials. But I can remember not long ago when it was the other way. The election of 2008, anyone remember that? And everyone said, the Democrats are going to reign supreme in Montana forever. Well, as the political gate swings back and forth, as the policy arguments go back and forth, the Supreme Court should just do its job, not keep getting involved and putting its toe into the political war. If you want to change the law, don't run for the court, run for the legislature. If you look at my background, I am a political conservative. That should not be a factor that helps you decide a case or not a case. Judicial conservative means really what I just talked about. Deciding cases narrowly, relying on and sticking to your prior precedent, even if you don't agree with it. So that's the key. That's the whole point of precedent. The contrast is judicial activists, which is you walk in with an agenda, you walk in saying, I'm going to fight for this or I'm going to fight for that.
I have been criticized saying that I somehow have prejudged. I've not prejudged anything. What I have said is I will follow the precedent of the Montana Supreme Court when it comes to the right of privacy. I emphasize that, I will say it again, particularly when it comes to women's reproductive freedom. Armstrong, confirmed, affirmed in Weems, says a woman has a right within the parameters established by that case to make her own health care decisions. It's a sound decision. When I say I'm going to follow precedent, I think the Montana citizens have a right to know I will follow precedent.
Well, since I believe that the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of the Constitution and can protect the Constitution against legislative encroachment or executive encroachment, I think the Supreme Court's probably the most important races on our ballot.
And the thing I'll tell you is the court will change in November, one way or the other. If I get elected, my goal will be to go in and remove politics as much as possible from Supreme Court cases.
It's a straw man we all know about. It's set up to make a false argument that the court is somehow out of control. The court's not out of control at all. The court is a very sound court that I will be joining with your help.
For Impact, I'm Sam Wilson.
In addition to the Chief Justice race, an Associate Justice seat is up for election this year. 2 current district court judges are vying for that seat, Catherine Bidigary and Dan Wilson. Rounding out the races on the High Court, the clerk's position is on the ballot as well. The clerk of the Supreme Court serves as an independent liaison with the public. Helena attorney Aaron Ferris Olson is challenging the incumbent clerk, Bowen Greenwood.
Well, when I ran in 2018, I focused on the public information aspect, and that is really where you see some market improvements that I'm happy about.
It's not a position that very many people pay attention to, and if it's done well, then that's fine.
Montana is the only state in the country that elects its Supreme Court clerk, something that can inject a normally nonpartisan position with a dose of politics.
What I really enjoy is the opportunity to help Republicans, whether it's the legislature's committee on the judiciary or whether it's other Republican elected officials. I enjoy the opportunity to help them know when they're not necessarily making the most effective argument they could, to help them understand the reality of how things work at the court.
If you think about the scales of justice, it's almost like the scales are right there in the clerk's office, because the clerk is receiving the filings, is talking to people, is interacting with the district courts that hold the records that are important to a case, and it's just this really incredible opportunity to make sure that everybody is set up to have a fair shake before the Montana Supreme Court.